All right, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about the Sony RX100 Mark VII. So that camera was recently announced, and I'm not sure if it may be available already. I'm not sure, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it. So, I had the Sony Alpha 65 for a while now, and I was looking at getting another camera. And as you may know, I ultimately ended up getting the Sony A6400. But prior to that, I had considered other cameras. I almost pulled the trigger on the Canon M50. I was actually sitting in the airport in Ottawa, and I had that camera pulled up. It was in my cart. I was about to buy it, and that was around December of 2018. And I was so close to buying that camera, but then I heard about the A6400 and what it promised, so I ended up getting that one, or I ended up putting off the purchase and ended up getting the A6400 later. But even before the Canon M50, I did consider the Sony RX100 series cameras. Now, at the time, they had the Mark V and the Mark VI, both available. And I remember really liking the Sony RX100 Mark V because it had a nice bright lens. It was a 24 to 70 millimeter equivalent. But at the wide end, it had an aperture of f1.8. And so I was super interested in that camera. It also came with a built-in ND filter. I really, really like that camera. And I know that it's not a perfect camera. It's got lots and lots of shortcomings. But I really seriously consider that one. And the reason why I didn't like the Mark VI was because the lens was a 24 to 200 millimeter equivalent, but at its widest, the aperture was only a 2.8. Now that said, the Mark VI introduced a touch screen, and so you could lock focus just by tapping on your subject on the back screen. And I thought that was such a good addition to the camera that actually put me off from buying the Mark V, because I figured that if I wait a little bit longer, maybe they'll release something like the Mark V but with a touch screen. Because being able to just touch on something and have the camera focus on it, it just seems like such a convenient thing. Not just for me but also for Charlotte, because she's a bit of more of a novice photographer. So that would just make the photography a lot more fun and easy and approachable. Supposedly also the color science got fixed in the Mark VI, and so again I was hoping that if I waited a little bit longer, maybe they'll release something like the Mark V, but with the improved color science. The Mark VI didn't have a built-in ND filter, which was a shame. But to be honest, I don't think it needed it because of its relatively slow aperture. So again, I was just hoping for something else. Now with a small camera like that, there are obviously limitations. Even if you look at the Mark V, it has a 1-inch sensor, and so a 1.8 aperture is not as great as you think. The blurriness of the background will not be like an f1.8 on a full frame camera. It won't be like that at all. So it's probably at best equivalent to about a 3.5 in terms of aperture. But that said, I love that it was super small and super compact, and you would have no problems carrying that everywhere. I carry my phone around all the time, and even though this camera is not the best camera that I own, it's the one that I have on me all the time. The A6400, the M50, those are small cameras, but once you put a decent lens on it, it's still decently big. Like I could not put those in my pocket, no way. Whereas the Sony RX100 Mark V or Mark VI, those are genuinely pocketable. I don't know why Tony Northrup said that those cameras don't fit in his pocket. Sure, it probably can't fit in your jean pocket, and arguably this thing can't really fit in my jean pocket either. It'll slide in, but you might have a hard time bending your legs at the hip because of it. But you can certainly put that into a jacket pocket or even your back pocket. So it would be pocketable, very portable. You're more inclined to carry that around with you, and so you're more inclined to use that to shoot your videos or your photos. Anyway, there are just a lot of pros to the Sony RX100 series cameras. I know that the battery life is not a strength, but that's something that unfortunately we can't really get away from for such a small camera. I probably have to get additional batteries. I kind of have to anyway, even with the A6400. So I ended up getting some extra batteries. I'm going to make another video about our recent experience shooting pictures at an aviary, and it is surprising how bad the battery life is on the A6400. Anyway, this video is not about that. So when Sony came out with and announced the Sony RX100 Mark VII, I gotta say, it is a very compelling camera. The lens is the same as the Mark VI, which of course is not something that I would have liked, but I think this is about as good a camera as you can get for that form factor, especially because there's now a microphone in jack. Sure, there's no hot shoe mount for a shotgun mic, but not everybody uses shotgun mics. I don't use a shotgun mic, and if you look at the top of that camera, there's literally no room for it, and so I don't fault Sony at all for that. It's not like the A6400 where they could have easily flipped the screen out to the side, and that would have solved problems with the hot shoe and the shotgun mic. In the case of the RX100, there's literally no room on the top. So even though the screen flips up as well, there's no way you would have put a shotgun mic there anyway. So I'm less upset about that. I love the fact that it has just a cutting edge autofocus performance with eye autofocus in video. That's something that the Sony A6400 doesn't have. And the fact that they were able to put it in such a small body, it's just fantastic. The fact that it can shoot 20 frames a second and have the reach of 200 millimeters makes this a legitimate camera for things like outdoor sports. And from what I've seen with its image stabilization or sensor stabilization, it's actually pretty decent. It makes me wonder again why they couldn't have put this into their APS-C bodies. But I'm not going to rant about that right now. But anyway, this is a phenomenal camera at $1,200. I know it seems a bit pricey for a point-and-shoot camera, but this camera has the performance that rivals the A9, in terms of action photography. I know the optics aren't ever going to rival something with a dedicated interchangeable lens, but for what it is, the fact that it can even shoot 220 frames a second, I think it's absolutely worth it. For some people, this can honestly be their only camera. Whereas if you get something like an M50, it's unlikely that you're going to be shooting action sports at all, even if you put on a long telephoto lens on there, because I just don't think that you have the autofocus capabilities or the high frame rate necessary. So anyway, that's it. And I'll see you in the next one.